There are moments in relationships that change everything. Not because they're dramatic, not because they're cruel, but because they quietly shift how someone sees you. This is one of those moments. It's not an argument. It's not a breakup. It's not even a fight. It's a single text. One message that feels harmless when you send it, but changes the emotional balance instantly. Most people never realize when it happens. They just feel the aftermath. Shorter replies, less warmth, less effort, and they can't figure out why. The truth is uncomfortable. Respect isn't lost through big mistakes. It's lost through small signals of emotional instability. And text messages are where this shows up most clearly. Because text strips away tone, context, and presence. All that's left is intention. And intention leaks through language. There was a moment in this story that looked insignificant. He sent a message late at night. Nothing aggressive, nothing rude, just honest, just vulnerable, just unnecessary. He had been waiting for a reply. Minutes passed, then an hour. His mind filled the silence. So he sent the text, the one he thought would clear things up, the one that was supposed to show care, the one that quietly changed the dynamic. It said something like, "Did I do something wrong?" That's it. 7 words. No accusations, no drama, but the damage was done. Here's why. That text didn't communicate curiosity. It communicated self-doubt. And self-doubt doesn't invite closeness. It invites distance. Respect isn't about dominance. It's about emotional stability. When someone senses that your emotional state depends on their response, something shifts inside them. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. The nervous system registers dependency before the mind catches up. This is where most people get defensive. They say, "So I'm not allowed to be honest?" You are. But honesty without regulation becomes emotional leakage. And emotional leakage erodes respect. The text wasn't wrong because it was vulnerable. It was wrong because it outsourced emotional regulation. It placed the burden of reassurance on the other person. And that changes the power dynamic immediately. The Stoics warned against this long before texting existed. They believed that when your peace depends on external validation, you give away control. And control in relationships is felt as steadiness. The person who sent that text wasn't weak. They were momentarily ungrounded. But moments matter, especially small ones. Because attraction doesn't collapse from one big event. It erodes from repeated signals. This text was one of them. The receiver didn't feel attacked. They felt pressure. Pressure to reassure. Pressure to respond correctly. Pressure to manage someone else's insecurity. And pressure is not attractive. It doesn't matter how gently it's expressed. The message underneath is always the same. My emotional state is now in your hands. That's the text that loses respect. Not because it's needy, but because it shifts responsibility. Before the text, there was ambiguity. After the text, there was imbalance. He was waiting. She knew it. And knowing someone is waiting on your response changes how you see them. Not consciously, instinctively. The person who waits becomes reactive. The person who is waited on becomes central. That's how hierarchy forms. Not through intention, through emotional positioning. The text didn't say, "You did something wrong." It said, "I'm unsettled without you." And that unsettled energy is felt immediately. This is why some texts kill attraction instantly. Not because of the words themselves, but because of what they reveal. They reveal that your center has moved from internal to external. The Stoics would say this simply: when you hand someone the power to regulate your emotions, you surrender sovereignty. And sovereignty is what respect is built on. People don't lose respect because you care. They lose respect when you need reassurance to remain stable. There's a critical difference. Care is grounded. Need is urgent. urgency leaks through text like nothing else. Because there's no tone to soften it, no presence to balance it, just words. And words carry weight. The receiver might not respond immediately, not to punish, but to create space. Because space is how the nervous system restores balance. But the sender doesn't know that. They interpret silence as threat. So they send another message, and another, each one digging the hole deeper, trying to fix the damage. But every attempt reinforces their same signal. I'm emotionally affected by your response. That's when attraction starts to fade. Not because the person stops liking you, but because the emotional polarity collapses. Before the text, both people were choosing the interaction. After the text, one person was seeking reassurance. And seeking places you lower in the hierarchy automatically. This is why the phrase hurts to hear. One text can lose respect, not because it's wrong, but because it reveals where your emotional anchor is. This episode isn't about teaching you to play games. It's about understanding emotional containment. You can feel uncertainty without transmitting it. You can feel doubt without asking someone else to resolve it. You can pause. That pause is everything. Because once a text is sent, it cannot be unsent. And the impression it creates lasts longer than the emotion that triggered it. The man didn't mean to change the dynamic, but he did, with one message. And once respect shifts, attraction never recovers the same way. Not instantly, not easily. This is only the beginning. Because the real damage of that text wasn't the words. It was what happened next. After that text was sent, nothing exploded. That's what made it dangerous. There was no argument, no confrontation, no clear rejection, just a subtle shift. The replies became shorter, the tone became neutral. The warmth didn't disappear overnight. It thinned. And thinning is harder to notice than loss. This is where most people make their second mistake. They sense the change. And instead of stabilizing themselves, they try to repair it through more communication, more explaining, more reassurance-seeking, more emotional exposure. Each message feels justified in the moment. But together they form a pattern of chasing emotional certainty. The person on the other side doesn't interpret this as care. They interpret it as instability. Again, not consciously, instinctively. Attraction operates below language. Before thoughts, before logic, the nervous system asks one question. Is this person grounded? And the answer keeps getting weaker. Here's the part most people don't want to hear. The text didn't lose respect because it showed insecurity. It lost respect because it showed lack of emotional containment. Containment is the ability to experience emotion without immediately acting on it. It's the difference between feeling anxious and making someone else responsible for calming you down. Strong emotional containment feels safe. Weak containment feels heavy. The receiver starts adjusting. They reply less. They delay responses. They keep things lighter, not to punish, but to regulate distance. Distance becomes a defense mechanism, and the sender feels it, so they try harder. That's the loop. The more the sender tries to restore closeness through communication, the more the receiver creates space. This is how attraction dies without a fight. Now here's where the Stoic perspective matters. Stoicism doesn't teach emotional suppression, it teaches emotional sovereignty. Meaning, you own your internal state. You don't outsource it. The moment you ask someone else to stabilize your emotions, you hand them power. Not authority, power. And power imbalance always affects desire. Because desire needs polarity. Two whole people choosing each other, not one person leaning. The text leaned, that's why it mattered. Most people focus on what the text said. That's a mistake. What mattered was why it was sent. It was sent to reduce discomfort, to collapse uncertainty, to get reassurance. And reassurance-seeking, even politely, communicates one thing: I'm unsettled without you. That message lands hard because it shifts the emotional burden. Now the receiver isn't just interacting, they're regulating. And regulation is work. Even if they like you, even if they care, work doesn't inspire desire. It creates obligation. And obligation suffocates attraction. This is why emotionally stable people feel rare. Not because they don't feel doubt, but because they don't transmit it immediately. They pause. They let emotion pass through without acting. They don't need instant resolution. That patience is felt as strength. The man in the story didn't lack value, but his timing betrayed him. The emotion wasn't wrong. The expression was premature. This is the subtle discipline most people never learn. You don't express every feeling the moment it appears. You allow it to settle. Because unsettled emotion sounds like urgency. And urgency sounds like need. And need collapses respect. The receiver might even feel guilty. They sense the imbalance. They pull back not because they want control, but because they feel the weight. And weight creates resistance. This is where people misinterpret everything. They think, she's playing games. He's losing interest. They're being cold. No, they're restoring equilibrium because the system tilted, and systems always self-correct, either through space or collapse. The tragedy is that one regulated pause could have prevented everything. If the man had felt the urge to send the text and chosen not to, nothing would have shifted. The silence would have remained neutral, mystery intact, polarity preserved. Instead, the text answered a question that didn't need answering. And in doing so, it exposed dependence. That exposure can't be unseen. Once someone senses that your emotional state is reactive to them, their perception changes permanently. Not because they judge you, but because instinct recalibrates. You become predictable. Predictability kills intrigue, and intrigue fuels attraction. This is why silence often feels more powerful than explanation. Not because silence is manipulative, but because silence shows regulation. It shows that you can sit with uncertainty, and people respect those who can sit with uncertainty. The over-communicator believes clarity builds connection. Sometimes it does, but premature clarity kills tension. And tension is what keeps desire alive. The text wasn't asking for clarity, it was asking for reassurance. That's the difference. And that difference is everything. The emotional power game isn't about caring less. It's about containing more. Containing emotion until it can be expressed without pressure, without urgency, without leaning. That's what keeps respect intact. And respect is the foundation attraction stands on. Once respect shifts, every interaction feels different, even if the words stay the same. By the time most people realize what went wrong, the damage already feels irreversible. Not because the other person is cruel, not because attraction vanished overnight, but because something subtle broke. Respect. And respect, once shaken, doesn't return through explanation. It returns through behavior, or it doesn't return at all. This is the hardest truth to accept. You can't talk your way out of a shift in emotional perception. Once someone feels that you lean on them emotionally, every word afterward is filtered through that awareness. Even neutral messages feel heavier. Even kindness feels expected. This is why fixing things with more communication often backfires. You're trying to repair emotional imbalance using the same tool that caused it. Words. But words aren't the problem. Timing is, containment is, energy is. The Stoics understood something modern relationships forget. The most persuasive force is not what you say, it's what you don't need to say. The man in the story thought the text showed honesty, but honesty without self-regulation feels unsafe because it signals that emotion is steering action, and people trust those whose actions are stable. The receiver didn't consciously decide to lose respect. Their nervous system did. Because the nervous system prioritizes safety and balance over intention. It asks one question: is this person steady? That text answered. And the answer wasn't what the sender hoped. From that moment forward, the receiver adjusted expectations. They didn't see him as dangerous. They saw him as affected. And being emotionally affected by someone lowers perceived leverage. This isn't cruelty, it's instinct. This is why the most damaging texts are not dramatic. They're polite. They're reasonable. They're soft. And that softness reveals too much too soon. The final lesson of this episode is simple but difficult. Not every emotion needs expression. Not every doubt needs resolution. And not every silence needs filling. Emotional discipline isn't coldness. It's self-respect. The difference between someone who maintains attraction and someone who loses it is not confidence. It's emotional pacing. Knowing when to speak, knowing when to pause, knowing when to let uncertainty exist without collapsing into it. The man could have felt the same doubt. But if he had waited, if he had regulated internally, the dynamic would have remained intact. That's the quiet power of restraint. Restraint isn't withholding. It's choosing not to leak emotional instability. Once restraint becomes natural, something shifts. Your words land differently. Your silence feels intentional. Your presence feels grounded. And grounded people are respected. Not because they're perfect, but because they don't outsource emotional regulation. This is what most people misunderstand about caring less. It's not about caring less. It's about needing less. When you don't need reassurance to stay centered, your interactions become lighter. And lightness invites closeness. Heavy emotion repels. This is the emotional power game. And the rules are unforgiving. You don't win by effort. You win by stability. If you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Before you send a message, ask yourself one question. Am I expressing clarity or am I seeking reassurance? If it's reassurance, pause. Let the emotion settle. Give yourself space before asking someone else for it. That pause might save the entire dynamic. One text can lose respect, but one moment of restraint can preserve it. That's the real power. Not silence, not control, but emotional sovereignty.